Good evening, everyone. Tonight is the Town Council regular meeting, Wednesday, March 16th, 2022 at 7 p.m. in the Town Hall Rose Room. Can we all please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hide. She's behind the TV. All right, we'll move on to item number 2, which is visitors. Are there any visitors that would like to be recognized? Can you come over here in front of the microphone? Thanks.
I know most of you people, I think, but for the ones who I haven't met, my name is Bruce Lighty. I live at 10 Indian Drive, been a 50-plus year resident of Clinton. You'll be glad to know I'm not going to ask you for anything tonight, but I wanted to clarify some things and keep you informed of something that's going on. I had a very good meeting with Carl last week, which I asked for, and what I had asked for at the time was what were the possibilities of getting floral basket hangers for the downtown area. I have been up in New London last year, and I don't know if you've seen them up there, but they're gorgeous. They're more than just pretty, they're spectacular. That led to another discussion, way more than I thought it would be. Carl said that in the past, and I know, and you know a lot of these groups too, there have been groups in town that have done good things on their own, whether it be the Pretty Committee or the Garden Club, or there's been individuals who have acted on their own too. My wife and I actually did the bridge geraniums for probably 20 years. But Carl suggested if this was going to have an effect, all these things should be focused in one group so that there be some continuity to the issue. And he explained, correct me if I get into this wrong, Carl, but when he was the town manager in Darien, they did similar things and it worked out really well for them. So that was more than I really expected to be involved in. So I went home and thought about it. Just for the heck of it, I Googled towns in Connecticut with beautification committees, and I was shocked. I stopped counting at 25. There's a lot, and there's probably way more than that. So it's nothing unusual in the state of Connecticut that have towns that have these committees. So I thought about this, and I asked a few like-minded people if they were interested in pursuing the issue too, and they said yes. So we have a meeting going on at the library next Saturday, the 26th. And the purpose of it really is just to gauge if there's enough interest to begin with, kick around some thoughts, brainstorm some ideas of where we could do this for the town, formulate a plan to contact these other towns, there's no sense in reinventing the wheel, and see if they can give us some advice. And then come back to the board or the town council to see what they thought. So I'm just telling you this now, so you may hear some things going on. We're meeting next week. Any of you are invited, incidentally. But I'm just making sure you know about it, so if you hear some things, you'll know what's going on. At the same time, you know, I'd like to ask you, either as council members or individual citizens, if you have, we're starting from scratch. So if you have any thoughts at all, any ideas, recommendations, advice, you know, please speak up. We'd love to get your input on the thing too. So, and again, any of you are welcome to come to this meeting. Just let me know so I get it.
What time is that?
It's going to be at 10 o'clock in the library. And I promise the people who are coming to this meeting, I'll do my absolute best to have it done in an hour. I hate meetings. I know you have plenty of them, and you probably feel the same way. I'm going to try to have it done in no more than an hour. Do you folks have any questions at this time? Any thoughts?
No. I think it's a great idea. I mean, to put something together so that it, obviously that, you know, it's a group that can, you know, be the lead on a lot of the stuff that wants to go on in town. I know we talk about it, a lot of the stuff that goes on in town, and beautification and upkeep, and I mean, I think it would be good if there was one committee that was handling that, and, you know, we can direct questions, concerns to that committee. So I think it's a great idea.
Have you spoken to Jane?
Yes. The people who have done things in the past. Jane is going to be at the meeting.
Okay.
And I can't remember the name of the person from the Garden Club, but we want to make sure that people who have done things in the past are recognized. We don't want to, and be a part of it. And if anybody knows of anybody else, I'd ask Carol Geiser, I haven't heard from her yet, from the tree committee, but anybody that's been involved in the past, we want to make sure that they don't get overlooked either.
So one of the first concerns that we had when we talked about the planters in downtown was the water, and so that's sort of the big top issue that came up before when we talked about expanding the program, so you might want to raise that right away about the
We've
cost.
thought about that. I mean, obviously, other towns have done it, so anything can be done. Of course, the issue comes up about money and how would you do it, and we'd have to face that issue, and the town would have to decide whether they want to get involved.
A lot of towns do it through the public works, but that's
Right.
additional.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
It's an effort that would get you a lot of free labor. There's expense involved, obviously, but it's one of the things that you could, you'll get a lot of help for nothing. Any other questions?
Thank you,
Now,
Bruce.
did you normally meet on Thursdays?
No, always
Never
Wednesdays.
did. Somehow I had it in my mind that you're not on Thursday, so I actually put a letter together. Because tomorrow's my anniversary, and I didn't want to spend it with the town council. So I'm going to leave these letters here, which basically says what I just said in my contact information.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming out. Thank you.
Very excited.
Carol's got something? All right. Thank you, Bruce. We'll move on to item number 3, which is the approval of the minutes from the March 2nd, 2022 meeting. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
All right, next we'll move on to appointments and reappointments. We have 2 reappointments on the docket for tonight. The first would be Gary Bousquet, and the next is Rita Foster. Gary Bousquet is the current tree warden here in town, and he has sent a letter, council members have gotten it, that he wants to continue on as the tree warden for another 2-year term. And we also received 2 letters, one from Todd Hedrick at the DPW in favor of the appointment, and from Michael Neff, also in favor of the appointment. So at this point, we'll look for a motion to approve and extend the tree warden's term until April 2024.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Have we received a letter from the tree committee in support?
Pardon?
Have we received a letter from the tree committee in
They did not
support?
submit a letter, no.
Were they informed of the reappointment?
He informed us, so he informed the town council, or the town that he wanted to be reappointed.
Yes, so it's the town, it's incumbent upon the town to inform the tree committee.
I don't know,
No.
no, they were not.
Do you want to potentially table it until we hear from the tree committee?
Anybody interested in tabling it? Okay, any other further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstain? Thank you. Next appointment is Rita Foster, who is currently our liaison with the Connecticut River Area Health District. She would like to continue on in that, and we're looking for a term for her until 11/1/2023. Do we have a motion to approve or reappoint Rita Foster?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Thank you. Item number 5, which is the suspense list. Everybody got a copy of this in their package. Obviously, this is obviously delinquent fees and money that's owed to the town. This is something that is still collectible. So these aren't monies that the town will never try to collect again. So they are still out there. They're outstanding, but we will try to continue to collect these fees. Statutorily, this has to be done every year. So that's why we have a copy of this. So we just need a motion to approve the suspense list. Anybody? Nobody wants to approve
I'll
this?
move it.
Okay. A second?
Second.
Any questions?
Yeah, so you're required to send this out to us by statute, is that,
The town has to file it.
This is an annual activity.
and we have to see it?
Any other questions?
In terms of percentage over previous years, how are we looking in terms of, I'm just curious in terms of the way the economy is looking and responsiveness.
Oh, our collection is much higher this year than last year at this point in time.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? All right, thank you. Item number 6, which is the authorization, or I'm sorry, yeah, the authorizing resolution. So before we dive into this, I will have Carl explain kind of what has come about as it relates to Pearson.
So this resolution is, the intent of the resolution is to help set the table for our next steps, which would be moving towards the Attorney General's office and cypre action with them in order to clean up the title on, for Pearson. The Morgan Trust has met. I have verbal confirmation from them that they have approved the dollar amount. As of right now, we still don't have formal notice from their attorney stating such, and their attorney and our attorney are trying to connect so that our attorney can then plan the next steps. So this is a half step forward where we're helping set the table, that both parties have agreed to this fixed dollar amount. We would hope that we would get a similar document like this out of the trust so that those two can go forward and frame the discussion with the AG's office. And then when we go to the AG's office, the hope is that because both parties have an agreed dollar amount, that would be acceptable, but it is subject to their approval and potential revision.
Any other questions
That's it.
at this point?
It's nice to hear it discussed publicly.
All right, so then at this point, we'll just look for a motion to approve the resolution regarding payment to the Morgan Trust to remove deed restrictions on the site of the former Abraham Pearson Elementary School.
I'll make that motion.
In a second.
Second.
Any other further discussion?
I just have a question about the one clause, whereas the use of the site for school is not feasible or practical. Is that going to be binding in a future context only because there was interest in it for school at some point, and or if we determine that that is the future use?
The deed restriction, which I'm sure you know, is specific to the property is to be used for the education of residents of Clinton. The whole point of this exercise would be to remove the deed restriction so that the property is, the town has a free hand in how the property could be used. The Board of Ed abandoned the property because it was not feasible or practical for them to continue to operate it as a school. That's the position we're taking at this point.
Yes, I understand that.
If you're going to sell it and a private entity is going to run it, you're unencumbered by that, because if you're going to keep it on the land, on the deed, and it's still there, then it can only be used for Clinton residents. And so a private Clinton resident-only school is the only thing that could go there.
I just want to make sure at no point nobody's going to pull this resolution up and say the town has said can't be used for school. They've made this resolution, and that's my only concern.
Anyone else? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay, thank you. Next up is number 7, is the Finance Director's Report. Sue?
Hi, good evening, everybody. This is the report for February, which is the 8th month of fiscal year '22. You'll see that your package, which includes my report, is back to the reports you previously used to get, which the first 2 pages of it represent the revenues. Page 1 of it is the current month and the current year-to-date compared to the prior year. The second revenue page is a trend data analysis of the revenues. The third page is a 1-page line item summary of the expenditures by budget. And then the 7 pages after that are the detailed line items by budget. And then it's the finance treasury accounts, as well as the fund balance and the contingency. So that's the reports that you used to get prior to this little glitch we had the last couple of months. So just to go over it very quickly, the revenues, February revenues were $1,978,000, broken down, that's $1.6 million of that was for the tax revenue collections. State grants of $240,000 were received, and then town service revenues were $96,000 for the month. The current tax levy is 99% of the budget compared to 98% last year. The 2 state grants received total $240,000. One of them was the special education grant, which was $206,000. That grant was budgeted at $370,000. I anticipate that the remaining balance of that grant will be received at the end of this year. $33,000 was received from the state for a body camera grant. That was not budgeted. The $96,000 of the town service revenues were basically a third of it was town clerk, a third of it was building fees, and the other third was made up of the police contractual, boat slips, and then other. Year-to-date, the revenues are $53.5 million, which is 91% of the fiscal year 22 budget. Expenditures for the month of February were $2.8 million. Of that, 1.9 were the transfers to the school for the operating and payroll expenses. $700,000 is for the town payroll and fringe benefits. The remaining $200,000 is further detailed in my report, and it's the normal recurring expenses. Year-to-date expenses for the 8 months were $38 million, which is 2/3 or 66% of the budget, which is where you would expect to be 8 months into the year, excluding the encumbrances, and it's the same trend as the prior year. Some anticipated line item overages I'm expecting that will require line item transfer requests from you in the future will be for the police communications overtime account and the DPW snow and ice account, sand account. The department managers are working on those requests. Investment balances were $37 million as of the end of February, and they're higher at the end of February. That's because it includes the bonding proceeds that you're aware of. The fund balance calculation was updated to reflect the $129,000 that you appropriated at your March 2nd meeting for the fire department apparatus truck. The unassigned fund balance has now been reduced by that amount to $6.5 million, or 26.1%, slight difference from the prior month. You'll see that calculation as well. And the contingency remains unchanged at $143,000. That concludes my report. Any questions?
I have a question for you. Is there, I don't know if you can have it now or maybe next time, or you could talk on a high level. What, over the last year in the unassigned balance, what has caused it to grow from 15% to 26.1%? I know it was the sale of Morgan, assuming a surplus. Do you know off the top of your head, or would that be something you could prepare for us?
That's up to Carl to it. I mean, a few of those things are exactly what you said. We had a tremendous savings last year as well. In the expenditure items, unfortunately due to the COVID, some of it was on the Board of Ed side, some of it was on the town side. As well as we had some Fema reimbursements come in over the last few years for some of the project works that were done for the September flood that we had and things like that. So it's been, we also had some additional ECS money that wasn't budgeted for that we had received 2 years ago. So I think all that information is outlined in the June Town Council report, which is online. My report has that outline detailed in there if you want to take a look at those, but I can, if that doesn't answer your questions, I can certainly put that together for you. But it's all the things you said plus all these others. We've been very fortunate these last couple of years. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'll look at the June Town Council report and talk to Carl if I have other questions.
Good.
Yes.
Thank you, Sue. Item number 8 is the council discussion future projects and correspondence and project log.
Yes, if you didn't print it out, here is your copy of the project log that was emailed to you previously. So the ARPA spending plan is at the top. You all know, because you were there, the special town meeting approved the appropriations that were outlined as discussed by the council. Up until this point, we did put an application process online. So right now, applications are being processed. I did put a note in here for looking to get some council input on future reporting on this. It's not a project, it's a funding mechanism, so I don't know what you want me to be reporting to you on. We will be generating reports that have to go off to Treasury on an annual basis for what the actual expenditures are. For transparency's sake, there should be some additional reporting that's made local. I don't know what you all want on this, because if getting the spending approved was a project, it's moved to that point. So I just need some feedback from you on what other additional reporting you want in this log format as it relates to ARPA. Pearson, as I noted earlier, the attorneys are coordinating, or more appropriately attempting to coordinate. The fire department facility plan, you saw the email that we're still trying to schedule a workshop to review that for new members to understand it to the extent that the old members do, but then also to lay out what the next steps would be on that as an activity. And then radio replacement project, that's pretty much the same report that there was previously. Additional funding is proposed in the budget and within the ARPA allocation. Natural hazards mitigation, I dropped that off based on our last meeting where there didn't seem to be any burning interest, so I dropped it off the list since there didn't seem to be strong interest to do much of anything out of the council members that were there then present.
How many applications have you gotten?
8.
Right.
Perhaps we could institute some sort of policy where we're asking for reporting from those who do receive the ARPA funding, either quarterly, annually, something along that line, just a base report as to how they've utilized the funds, just so the council is aware.
Yeah, so that's in the application process where they identify how the funds will be used. A lot of it is nonprofits citing lost revenue, which was the discussion that was pointed out during the council. So it's gap filling their budgets, or if they had to respond to increased activity. Shoreline Soup Kitchen is collecting monies from multiple towns in their service area so that they can buy a truck. So each one's a little different, but that's why I asked for a little bit of input, because it's not a project, but whatever, we're past a major milestone. So what kind of additional reporting do you want on an ongoing basis? Because in some cases, once the check is cut,
It's done.
Any checks been cut, or is it going to be a much longer process for you?
I need to review everything, and we're probably going to need some additional documentation to process checks. So again, it's not going to spin on a dime. This is federal dollars we're responsible for, so there needs to be a certain degree of scrutiny, hence the application process. Didn't seem to be an issue for the majority of people. I know one individual was complaining about having to apply, but we're just not going to cut a check without having something to back it up.
With the natural hazards mitigation plan, there's discussion in it regarding coastal resiliency and the issues along our shoreline. The state has allowed for investment of funds for coastal resiliency, and I don't know if there's a discussion you want to have at some point about the undesignated fund surplus and potentially putting it towards that. We'd have to have a very specific project allocated probably, and I don't know if we're even there yet to have that conversation, but it's an issue.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of why I wanted to, it was, natural hazards mitigation was identified, but then doesn't seem to be, or at least at the last meeting, there didn't seem to be any interest in pursuing it further. We are doing different things, so you're all aware of the bridge project we're trying to work with Ducks Unlimited on to leverage some National Fish and Wildlife Service grant dollars. I've reported in my report that we're using the Climate Corps from Yukon to do some resiliency studying for us, so that helps move pieces of it forward. Taking and allocating funding towards climate resilience is maybe a finance policy discussion. It is a topic of conversation that comes up with the bond rating agency of your coastal community. What are you doing to position yourselves? Brantford kind of set the template by putting some money as a dedicated reserve for coastal resiliency. A few other towns have either said, yes, we intend to do it, but haven't funded it, or they've funded it in some small amount. So that's more of a finance policy discussion of, do you want to put it in there as taking some undesignated fund balance and designating it so that you can use it for grant match or some emergency response or something of that nature, so you have dollars there ready to go, committed to it. That's kind of how Branford has used it. That's the question we get when S&P gets to that point in the review process of what are you doing for coastal. So I don't know whether it's, since nobody wanted to talk about natural hazard mitigation, it should be a finance policy discussion at that point.
And I think with the natural hazard mitigation, it's like many of the other plans in the town, the dollar amount is so overwhelming. I think it's difficult for people to have a realistic viewpoint of how to start tackling some of the projects. Perhaps it makes sense to have some sort of subcommittee that focuses on it with all the different bodies in Clinton that have a tie to it. And certainly the shoreline folks would want to have some role as well. What about state money? This is a state project that I was talking about. It allows you to put the money into a state fund, which grows as well. And that's what Carl was talking about.
Okay.
But there's certainly money. There's not state money right now for coastal resiliency, but there's certainly federal money. But a lot of it, like Carl was saying, there's matches, and there's such huge projects that
You would take some of our money, create a designated reserve. Whether it goes into a state investment vehicle or not is immaterial. It's you've created the pot of money that exists if you need funding for a local match, if you need funding for an emergency response. So it's for a bonding purpose, and why it becomes part of finance policy is it speaks to financial flexibility to respond in the event of some kind of disaster, or that there is a forward action to have funds available to do an implementation of something that's in the natural hazards mitigation. So it's something that we've talked about during our bond reviews. We are probably at a point where maybe there's capacity to do that, but that could be peeled off and just be a council finance discussion. And then leave the actual implementation plan to another vehicle. I know on the administration side of it, we're picking up pieces if we can. There seemed to be council interest. There doesn't seem to be council interest now, so I took it off. If there is renewed council interest, you can go back on. I just need to know what your interest is.
I'd also like the temporary senior center to be considered a project as well. I thought it was interesting looking at the budget numbers that the estuary has asked less and less of us for the last 3 years. And so we're dedicating less to them, only $20-something thousand this year. Obviously, they're asking less because we have fewer people taking part.
No, because of COVID, the meal program was curtailed.
Okay.
they're also getting more funding, so they're getting it as.
Right, grants and stuff like that.
Yeah, so they're able to reduce it.
But I would like to see a space in this town. I think that a lot of seniors would like to see that too. And anybody else at the table interested in that being a project?
I mean, we did a committee, we had a subcommittee that we put together for senior housing. And they came back with a response that they wanted us to look at doing the senior coordinator, that they would hire that individual first and then have that individual kind of be the lead on all that. And unfortunately, we hired somebody, and now we don't have somebody, so now we're back on the street again looking for somebody. You know, so the council did discuss that, you know, previously, and that was the outcome of that study and that information that they went out and received. So that's kind of where that, you know, that whole project went.
I think if we were to have a senior, a person in place to head up this activity, the pieces will fall into place once they are there and once there is some sort of a program development in mind. That is the key element, is that we can talk about a room and we can talk about a space and we can talk about how much money they're going to need, but until there's somebody there who has put the walls together to fill with our plans, there really isn't anything we can do at this moment in time. We all want it, but we have to have that person come in and start the ball rolling.
Okay, so once that person is in, we we could talk about that again.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's why we had that person who was sort of moving, and then,
That was the point,
Yeah.
was the person would build the program, identify the gaps, and then once you've got the program, you start to build people,
Right.
and then you move towards a facility. Just
Harry, just
creating a room doesn't give you a senior
You know,
center.
we are both, this is very high on our priority list. So we have to get that person into that position, and then we can, you know,
Okay, great, that's promising.
yeah.
All right.
anybody else? Alrighty. We will move on to Chairman's report. I do not have anything to report this evening. We'll move on to 10, which is the Town Manager's report.
So you have my written report. As was noted during the project log, we've received 8 applications for ARPA funding in the buckets of arts and assistance to nonprofits. So those are in the vetting process as we speak. The accounting has been put in place by Sue, so we've got account numbers. The cybersecurity piece, which is a town-run project and Board of Ed run project, that is moving forward. The intent was to have cybersecurity funding put in place before we start the new fiscal year so that we could get credit for that as a risk management activity for a renewal of cybersecurity insurance so that A, we can be insured, and then B, it's at a reasonable price point. So things are moving on that front. Regional housing plan, there was a meeting of the local committee that received a report. There's a fair amount of data about the housing market, demographics in Clinton, and sort of laying out what the environment is. The next step for that group is to have a discussion around particular policy issues that should appear in the plan. So the consultant and I have had some initial conversations around concepts that could go in that would start to address what we are supposed to have in our state mandated affordable housing plan. Beyond that, hiring is consuming a significant amount of time. Been doing a fair amount of interviews to fill the finance vacancy and a land use vacancy to fill that we're still working on. WPCC clerk is also something the interviews are soon to be scheduled for, and then reviews of applications coming in for the vacancy over in Human Services as program coordinator as well as a senior program coordinator. So those picks have to come back to the council before we're done. So I'll be asking for your attention on some hiring at a future meeting. So that we can keep moving on that front. Facade program, we did receive our first viable application from an entity that met the requirements of the program and got the 2 quotes. Didn't seem to be a significant hurdle on his part. He was able to get his application in. However, because it involves a historic property, SHPO needs to be involved, which is the State Historic Preservation Office. They want to come down and look at the property and discuss the scope of work. So getting the project to a point where work is actually being done and now is predicated on SHPO approving the project. Carter Hill Bridge, as I noted previously, we needed to get that moving forward, have a notice to proceed so that that project could move forward and satisfy the state. The detour for Carter Hill Bridge does impact Pleasant Valley Bridge. We're trying to organize schedules between the successful bidder for Carter Hill, who would actually like a delay. We've got to deal with the DOT on that, as well as getting the Pleasant Valley contractor to get the road open so that that bridge can be open. The expectation was that the individual was going to take advantage of the early notice to proceed, early work period. That was not taken advantage of. Contracted due date for them to deliver the bridge to us is April 22nd. Hopefully that will take place, and then any backing up of Carter Hill, we can make the detour work a little bit more, be less problematic. Certainly Pleasant Valley's gone on longer than we anticipated it was going to go on. And I will continue to be working with Peggy Adler as we do the Commerce Leffingwell Historic District. We now have the grant contract out of the state, and I will be preparing an RFP for that project. And then Peggy and I will be meeting again to talk about getting that moving.
Thank you, Carl. Any comments or questions for Carl?
What exactly is Peggy's grant covering? What will be done with the money?
The grant that was presented to the council and approved by the council was to hire, would fund hiring an architectural historian to document the assets in the possible Leffingwell Commerce District and prepare a report suitable to send off to the feds for approval as a national registered historic district.
Anyone else? All right, hearing nothing, we will move on to number 11. Town Council Liaison Reports. Does anybody have anything to report tonight? Carol?
The DPW meeting last night, they touched on the Carter Hill Road and Pleasant Valley situation. And I thought that at the meeting, Todd Hajek said that the approval had been received to hold off on Carter Hill till Pleasant Valley was done. So I don't know whether, no, you don't
The
have.
contractor is desirous of that, and we are desirous of that.
Right.
DOT needs to be on board with it. and that
Yeah, I mean, I
seems-
understood from your report, but I thought that Todd said in the meeting that they had received that approval, so I'm taking that out of my report. But also, somebody asked about the fuel contract for the town, and Todd reported that this is the last year of a 3-year fuel contract that expires June 30th, 2022. So we need to be aware there could be a significant difference in what they need for that line item. And that's my report.
Carol? Anybody else?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll report, Mr. Chairman, about the police commission 2 nights ago. Again, the budget is, as Sue has indicated, everything is right on schedule. The only problem we have, of course, is communications. The overtime is going to be a little high still because of the fact that, unfortunately, they hired a new dispatcher and the individual quit. So we're right back to square one. They have to go back out, get an individual and train them and all. So we can expect an overage in the communications. The traffic authority has issued, and what they're going to do is send out a notice for a public hearing for that golf cart situation over in that neighborhood. And I believe they're gonna try to get it sometime in the end of April so that they can move forward. Other than that, I'm done.
Thanks, Dennis.
P&Z, both the conversations seem to sort of disintegrate into the regs. The regs caused a bit of problems this last meeting. And then John Guskowski spoke about the housing program, public meeting coming up, I believe. So, is it town meeting, public meeting?
Hasn't been scheduled as of yet, so I don't know what John
Talked
told.
about the future, so he didn't have a date. That's it.
Anybody else? All good? All right, look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? Discussion? All in favor?
I
Opposed? Abstained? Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.